Randy's not singing.
It was just that.
Or has been.
Oh, May. I finally got. Here to we can do.
On that.
The trouble that's words they want to hear.
Figured you'd be doing this, city.
Technology?
Yeah.
No. Until about a year ago, I sold a paper calendar, so.
That calendar. You'd be surprised. So, I just put up when somebody takes one.
I have a weekly one on the fridge, so everybody.
Bit of a lot, Trent. Yeah. Everybody, friends.
It never stopped. I finally had to tell Fred that everybody like that. I mean, if you wanted something, then it's non-stop.
When Brian took a picture of a sore on his eye last week and sent it to Mackenzie.
At least it was designed.
Yeah.
We had discussions as to what's acceptable. Just like there's something like.
No, I'm here. Check out to the doctor. Well, he had something from the, since we went to the ocean. Yeah, he put tea tree oil on it, it's like, it went away, but. It's like, it won't go away.
Don't you like tea tree oil?
It's strong. It's strong.
You get now, we get.
There you go.
No, I used to.
Yeah, we don't like the tea tree oil.
Oh.
Yeah, 5 minutes, I just need 5 minutes.
We can like 5 steps.
I just made myself co-host. Got that kind of power.
Yeah.
Some people send you a lot of stuff. They send you a lot of junk. And you have to spend all that time to read it.
Was that why?
Do we need to review, you just push one click. I think we're good.
Okay.
At least I think so.
Good for now.
We don't have
As far as
our
technology.
normal IT person here, so.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? Sunday liquor sales?
Yeah. Are you watching? Can you mute your phone? I'm worried we're gonna end up getting feedback. We're not sure. Okay, Sunday liquor sales, Stephanie's kind of got that one. That's it.
Yeah, they, legislature decided that expanding Sunday liquor sales for those that have already adopted it, for the retail liquor stores and the retailers, and as early as 9 a.m. Just still, again, no Easter or Christmas, I think it was. But the city has to adopt an ordinance just to change that in our code book. I did reach out to our liquor store owners. Park Plaza didn't really have a preference on So in good spirit said they would actually like to leave the hours the same, just no change at all. And third base liquor, he said he would just change, keep the same amount of hours, but just move it up, starting at 9 and ending at 5, instead of opening at noon. So he was fine with he changed hours also. We did have, I think it was Price Shopper that reached out, they're already open on Sundays, so they would just be able to sell before noon. But that would be, we might heard that. An ordinance to be published for 60 days, and people have petitioned against that. Questions?
They really had a real strong opinion, did they?
Too much?
No one had a real strong opinion on any of it.
No, Elizabeth Stanchfield said that if you wanted to know more about why they chose not to have us, change hours, she would let you know, but she didn't really tell me why they would want to keep it at noon.
Don't they open at 1 now?
It's noon.
At noon? That's at the church, is that
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yes. I wonder if that maybe.
I assume so, but
Nobody that's really too excited about it, is it?
yeah, Park Plaza is the one that actually reached out to me and asked me about it, and I hadn't heard of it yet, so he was actually.
Oh, I think, yeah, all the cities up in Johnson County and Spring Hill, all members of them.
They've all changed, yeah. I think just to keep with the state.
Hmm.
We just need to try.
I think most people buy alcohol and what the hours are anyway. They get
That's what I say, if they want bad enough, they'll drink it. Buy it when we've got it set as it is.
Yeah.
I'm still old fashioned and think that Sunday mornings for girl, not for beer.
Have we had anybody else, has anybody else reached out? Besides, because you said Park Plaza didn't have a preference, they asked about it.
Yeah, they're the ones that reached out to me, and Price Shopper has reached out.
Why did they reach out? Did they want it changed?
What?
Did they want it changed?
Price Shopper? She didn't say, she just kept asking if it had changed.
Maybe she was just asking.
Yeah.
I would say they probably have had customers because it's asked about it because they have went to communities around us and it is legal there at night and they just look at what. So they was just calling for information.
Take it that there's not real excitement to do that, so we won't worry about that item.
It just doesn't seem like an issue that should even be a big issue.
I'm surprised it's passed at the state level.
Oh, I know.
Well,
If the Chiefs weren't doing very good, they probably wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah, it's those people who realize on the way to the game that they forgot to get it together.
Well, they probably go right through Missouri, that's.
yeah, they do.
Okay.
They'll get it. They want to think that.
Yeah, right through Johnson County.
Do hay harvesting, I will say I'm subbing in for Randy, so. So as I put kind of in the little, just the little notes that we put out, we don't really have any real set rules that we've kind of gone by that we've let certain areas pay their property. And so we were kind of looking at trying to better define that so that whether that's, we can formally put it in the code or whether that's just a formal policy that we follow, that at least we have something that, hey, when somebody asks a question, we can point to, this is what we're doing, rather than just, oh, we've kind of always let that happen, so.
So what's the question?
So.
Somebody's problem with it.
Well, there are some properties that have traditionally been hayed that we've had several complaints on.
Okay,
And-
such as.
Well, there's a property, I'm trying to think of what the cross streets, but it's not the Ursulines property, but it's back behind there and is it Miami Street that runs in front of Ursulines and it goes all the way down to Osage. It's off of Miami at Osage back in there. There's some property that has been paid historically, my understanding. So, and we've had a lot of complaints about that property, and we're like, well, we're just kind of let them do what they've had to do in the past. And so we're just trying to get more specific on, do we want to allow that? The idea is that it would have to be at least 1 acre. It couldn't be in the NC zoning, which is like the main, like what I would call residential one,
Residential.
you know, the main residential zoning. You couldn't, that wouldn't be a possibility, but any of the other zonings goes over 1 acre, with the idea that then it's something that potentially that staff can, they would have to approach staff each year and say, hey, we want to do this, so that it's not just pure neglect, that it's not getting done, that they're letting it grow.
Is that because the neighbors are complaining because they think it needs mowed and the people are leaving it to hay it so it gets taller?
Yes, that is my understanding of the situation.
What do they do with the hay when they get?
I'm assuming they bail it and take it someplace and
I don't think they hate it as often as they maybe used to, from what I've heard.
and part of this is to look, go ahead,
Who owns it?
I'm not sure.
Because I know the people in Osage or the people there on the S.
It's somebody that's not on either one.
It's just a lot back in
That's
there.
one, but there's other, I don't want to get, let's not get focused on.
Well, I'm not, I'm just wondering why all at once, because.
Well, I think honestly, it's probably something we probably ought to get figured out, because we do have Ursuline property that has a large amount of acreage that can be paid. And trying to, one thing is we're talking about would be is that it would have to create like a 20-foot buffer strip. So from their property line, they would have to maintain that mode just so that it keeps it down away from the next property. And just kind of coordinating those events, the haying event with the harvesting event with the city, so that we know there again, we know that it's going to happen. And that way, if we get calls, we can say, this is part of our policy. They've been approved. It's supposed to be hayed in September. It's supposed to be hayed in July or whatever. So
But they have to have an acre of land.
minimum of 1 acre. We could set that at 2 acres.
That eliminates quite a few.
Right.
Is that part be behind Arden's?
Yeah, it's.
Probably, yeah.
Sometimes.
Some of that's on the state though, isn't it? Like Arby's down in there, is it part of that state?
Some of it is close to the highway.
Yeah.
I know that gets kind of hard to, like, over by the railroad bridge. If it's close to the railroad bridge, I think the railroad's supposed to keep it up.
Yeah.
And it gets
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Well, that's something that we can, they have contract mowers that they use that we can work with them and make sure that we're getting that load. Main thing is to see if there's interest for council for us to kind of formalize this, and we can try to get something put together that's rather either that or we just stop worrying about it.
Have you had anybody complain about it?
About the one, yes.
And that's located where?
It's basically just at Osage in Miami. There's that road houses that's on Osage, and then back behind there, there's a strip of land that,
It's pretty bad.
It's right there by Olson Pins, isn't it? And there by those apartments
Oh.
on the S curve.
Someone, I don't know, I mean, they don't get to it often at all, I don't think.
I don't know that I realized that they paid that because I've turned that in a couple of times.
It's really tall.
And that's not connected with the Ursuline property in any way, is it?
No.
I think everyone thinks.
It's got that drainage way in through there.
So do they actually hay it, or do they just
I
like
guess
grow
they
tall and then just cut it down
I-
like
it's-
once in summer or something?
I don't know, but it's way too tall for a mower, a regular mower. It needs to be
Yeah.
paid.
A brush on.
It's bad. It's really bad.
I mean, if it's weeds, it's not good for you.
Oh, it's, they used to hate it, but I don't think they've touched it in at least a year.
And more than likely, it's a nuisance rather than age.
Yeah,
Well, and I guess from that standpoint, I mean, I think it would be good to have some sort of regulation in there, and then, there again, if they haven't come to us, then it can be treated as a nuisance.
Right.
Easily, we know that, hey, you haven't made plans to hay it,
Well, it's good to define the setbacks anyway,
yeah.
keep it clean from the neighbors in the road.
well, it's easier if someone says something, you can say they're paying it in July or whatever. But at least they'll know they have a plan.
Of course, there's areas all over town that need to be mowed. The grass is getting pretty tall. I don't know when somebody decides to go in and mow it. Or you contact the owner and tell them they need to mow it, or.
Well, that's part of the code process. I think once it gets to the 12-inch level, then they would get a letter that needs to be mowed. I'm not sure on the time frame. They probably have 10 days.
I thought it was 2 weeks.
Well, it could be 2 weeks.
And then.
Then they have to mow it, and then if they don't mow it, then we talk to our contract mower and we go mow it.
And then
And
bill
then-
their,
Then it gets billed back to their
Yeah.
property tax.
And if it happens again, you don't have to send them that certified letter, do you? Just go
I'd have to
on.
verify that. I'm not sure on that process.
I thought that you could just notify them once by certified letter. And then
You're right, as long as it's the same growing season.
because I've turned one in a couple of times.
Seems like that hasn't been as bad, the normal ones. I know we used to have a lot of trouble in Rockwood, but there's houses there now, so.
They're building it. Yeah,
Mhm.
they are.
We'll continue to work on those. If there's some other parameter, like there again, I think we're looking at 1 acre minimum. If that's something you really think 2 is better, let us know so we can kind of incorporate that.
One acre, 2 acres is getting to be pretty big. I don't know if we have.
What I think, not gonna get much hay off of it.
No, we're not.
Keep it.
Hmm?
They're trying to keep it keep the property taxes at $20 a year versus real estate taxes. You can save you a lot of money.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna Thank you this presentation. So we've been working on compiling information for the half-cent sales tax and how we're gonna divvy up the spending on that. And so most of that information I've got. I was still kind of waiting on some information on the pool. But I've got some preliminary numbers on that, so kind of go ahead and step through this. And I want to point out that, I realize these numbers are what we've been given. Realize those could change. I realize they could be lower, but this is what we have, and that kind of gives us a sense of scale, at least, even if they're not 100% accurate. So on revenue projections, this graph shows the total historic sales taxes. So this is the half-cent that goes to the general fund, the half-cent that goes to the kind of the special half-cent, and then the quarter-cent that goes to the fire. So that's the total for all that sales tax collection, but that shows you what the relative it would be for that if you just took the half-cent portion out of there. But this is like I said, this is somewhat familiar. We put that out monthly for you guys to look at. And you see that 2020 was a very big year for us. And this graph is just to show the percent change from the prior year. So we don't have the prior year for 2008, so that's why that one's blank. And so you know we came out of that kind of economic downturn there. We had a couple of lower years. We built back up, and so it was by 2012, that's kind of when we started seeing the same level of sales tax as we had in 08. And then we've had growth, steady growth since that time. When you look at the average across from 2009 through 2020, that is 2.32%. But that also includes that rather large 9.1% increase last year. You take that out, that average then becomes about 1.7. So off of that, I created 4 different scenarios for sales tax projections. Again, these are just estimates. The first one includes inflation at 2%. It starts off, each year starts with $75,000 in December of 21. And then next year is in the 2% inflation rate starts at 830,000 and then adds 2% each year after that. Then I have the flat 800,000 per year, flat $900,000 per year, and then kind of the average of those 3 just to show where that kind of falls middle or amongst those estimates. So we really have about between 12 and 14.4 million dollars to play with as we go into this conversation about expenditures and what we're going to do with the actual money. Any questions? So funding options, just kind of talking through some of that. We have, if we can approach this as just pay as you go. As we collect money and build it up and save it, then we're doing projects. That allows you to save for those projects, but it also can mean that you're delaying some important projects until you save enough money. So it kind of can slow down the amount of work that you can do. You could bond it. It helps you get those projects underway faster, but you also have financing costs that eat into your total amount of money that you can really put towards projects. And one scenario that I had Greg Bramberg run for us was to look at, okay, if we took the O&M cost for the pool out of what we estimate that we're going to get, and he used as a projection of 2% inflationary. His start number was a little bit different, but same sort of scenario for revenue. But we took out the pool O&M and then said, okay, what's the max that we could bond with that money that we have left over? And that was right at $10 million that we could bond at that point. But we're paying about 1.6 million in finance, what I would call finance charges. That's the cost of this year's interest that we have to pay.
How much was that?
1.6 would be money that we wouldn't be able to spend because it's for the bond issuance itself.
Because it's what?
It's the financing charges for and the bond issuance and all that, the cost to issue those bonds.
You actually just a minute on when you said you take the pool out, what do you mean by that?
We took the pool's operation cost, so that $150,000 that we estimate that we have to have per pool. So if we were making $800,000 of revenue, we took $150,000 off of that, and then said, okay, now we have $650,000 that we can use for a bond payment, and that's how they kind of calculated that.
So that would basically give us 8.4 million, roughly.
No, the 10 million would be spent, could be spent on projects. So your total cost is like 11.6.
Okay.
You can take the operations out because you're looking at those yearly
Yeah.
anyway.
So the operation.
Yes.
So basically, out of that money, you would need whatever enhancements you want to do to the pool
Yes,
and to the ball.
yes. And any other part in streets. And then, you know, kind of I mean, that's kind of the mix, right? You're doing a little bit of pay as you go, you're doing a little bit, you're bonding certain projects out, and get things going faster and making those improvements sooner. Alternatives, you know, I think there's some grant opportunities. I think those are probably more going to be at the local level with some of the foundations more than getting grants from the state or something for some of these needs. Now that can help, some of that can be helped with street sided stuff, but the parks and park facilities would be less likely. There's also the opportunity for a capital campaign. I'll talk a little bit about that again. That's not something that we have to do, but it's a potential alternative to fund something like the Lazy River. And I'll talk about the cost of the Lazy River here in a little bit, but that's something that we probably aren't going to do, even though it's really popular. And then, you know, sponsorships, like if we build the ball fields, getting a sponsor for the dugouts, and maybe that part of that sponsorship covers that cost for that dugout or scoreboard or whatever. So there's some opportunities there to kind of help drive down some of those costs in a sense and help fund the project. So ball field development, we've gone through two different kind of some scenarios with confluence. Both of those create a fourplex ball field design with turf fields. One would place that at Wallace Park, the other one would be at an alternate site. I think it's important to note that there is a price difference here, but the alternate site includes the batting cage, concessions and restrooms, and two larger fields that would put it closer to, and that adder is about $300,000 on the estimate. So if you take that, add $300,000 to the Wallace Park option, you're right at the same cost. Because the sports field add-ons for the Wallace Park, that's where the concession stands and batting cages and restrooms come in. They didn't have it as part of the sports field, so.
Right, so really just about $150,000 difference between the two, if we take that out.
Yeah, and I will say that the alternate site did not include land costs. It also, I will say, I think it was particularly high in the utilities. It's the estimate for utilities for the alternate location was almost twice as what they had for Wallace Park, and I don't think it would be that high, honestly. Wallace Park may not be as high as it was projected to be either, but I'm real comfortable that it would be cheaper on the site. Any questions?
You think it would be cheaper at the alternate site?
The utilities, I think it will be cheaper than what they quoted. They quoted $420,000 to do utilities up there, and we've got at least one of the sites that we've looked at, and even the other one that we would have water and sewer relatively close. That I don't think it would cost that to get those utilities there, but we haven't vetted that out.
So I have a question. This is going to be on the ballot in November.
The Recreation
The
Commission is going
Recreation,
to be on the ballot,
yes.
so that's something separate.
When you're
from this.
talking to people, they're gonna put it together. I mean, they're not, I don't think they're gonna separate the baseball field from the rec commission. And maybe they will directly, but to me, it's, I mean, if I'm gonna vote on something in November, I wanna know where the baseball fields are gonna be. I mean, that's just me. I don't know. I've had other people ask me, where are the baseball fields gonna be? And for the November election and the vote, we're gonna have to advertise that or tell the people, give them an idea of what is going on. It isn't just that you're gonna have a rec commission. They're gonna wanna know, I mean, I already asked people last week, where are you building the baseball fields? They're gonna wanna know that. I mean, I would wanna know that before I voted in November.
Well, and I think that's what we're trying to work on tonight.
Okay.
And the rec commission covers much more than just baseball, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It
Right.
covers
And that's-
all of our
yeah,
sports in
yeah.
town.
I think it's really an education issue with the public to make sure they understand that these are two totally separate issues. Because even if the rec commission passes, how we spend this money rests with the council. And yes, we have to decide what we're going to do, where we're gonna put it, how much we're gonna spend on it. But the rec commission, just thinking about baseball, when you think of the rec commission, you're missing a ton.
I mean,
I
think that's what we
need
lots
to-
of sports.
I realize that, but I don't think the average person's gonna separate.
Well, I think so. If you talk to people whose kids play soccer.
Well-
And basketball and just all those tennis, all
Well,
those things that's out there. Because we have a lot of soccer.
Well, yeah, it's everything, but still,
Essentially, all the rec commission will be changing is managing our
Managing,
system.
yeah. that's true, I know that.
I do think people will be more comfortable in November if we have a plan.
I think we definitely, to my knowledge, we've only discussed 3 possible sites. One of them, we haven't even done anything further on, to my knowledge. And the other one, I don't think it's gonna be a good site because of where we want, where it's been talked about, because that's on prime housing out there and stuff. So I think we're down to basically one site myself. And that's back where it was originally planned.
Well,
Oh, no.
none of the sites were proposed where housing
No,
is already been proposed. There's been some vision out there, but there has not been any formal plat ever done
yeah,
on that property out there.
I do know the owner has, in the past, came to the city and has said he plans on developing it originally. And sooner or later, and he had drawn up some stuff and got some input from the city on it. Whether he carries through with it, I don't know or not.
that was in 2004 or 2005. It was about the same time that Rockwood went in, and he did, he had the whole architectural drawings and everything, but, he's now just taken the 16 acres north of Rockwood. We took that into the city,
Mhm.
and
All it's been added.
he's got plans for
And it's
that.
not, but it hasn't been platted at this point.
No,
But that's where housing is probably gonna go if he actually does futurely develop it.
but he's got 160 acres there. I'm sure he could park with 30 if he wanted to.
I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is, I don't think the people out there are gonna want to go on ball fields with lights and stuff.
Let's, I think we're getting into the weeds of location, because really this is about scale of costs. Because I think as we work through this, we're gonna see that we've got a lot more costs than what we have funding. So then we gotta make sure that we're that's gonna help drive the decision of what we're doing.
Well, and I think like you pointed out too, the difference between the Wallace Park and the alternate site is the $300,000 adder, which isn't included in the Wallace Park site. So if you add that back in, you're talking a difference of $150,000.
Well, and some of that might go away
It
because
might,
those 10% are based on that lower number.
Right. But it's still, in my opinion, it's still not a huge enough difference to
No.
make that the primary discussion right now. We really need to talk about the overall cost and everything else we need to do with the pool and the other park locations of the streets.
So with pool operations and maintenance, we've estimated $150,000. And that comes out to $2.25 million over the life of this sales tax. For the 15 years, it would be $2.25 million to operate the pool. As I said, kind of during budget time, that number could come down because of the way that we've kind of reallocated some of the personnel costs back to the fund that in the general fund, because we were taking out some HR costs and all that. But we also have to understand that if we add enhancements there, we may have to have more guards on duty every shift. And we may also have to think about paying at a different rate for our guards to ensure that we have the proper number of guards to meet our need. And because I know that was a challenge for a lot of communities this year. I think we were fortunate, but we had a very young crew this year. So, and we had barely enough for what we needed to do. So,
Do we have an idea of how much we went in debt on the pool this year?
I don't have the latest number. Ultimately, we should end up with a positive in that fund.
Right,
But it's
close
because we took the last that was in Fund 23, is that right? The pool reserve fund, and transferred it all into this year. So as far as we'll have money, we probably still lost money even though we transferred that in, because I think our fund balance will drop, but we'll end up in the black when it's all said and done. But I wouldn't have that until we wouldn't have those final numbers actually until October, because we just had a pay period. I'd have to look. We might have those Monday, because we had the last pay period, and depending on when that came out.
It's usually on the really did.
Stephanie, do you know, we get paid Wednesday, which includes the last of the pool. That money would come out in September's, even though it's paid for August work, would come out in September's ledger, right?
Sure.
Because August would have already been
I said
closed
that
out. by then.
sounds right.
So yeah, we won't know until October what the final number was on the pool side of things.
So you won't know what's left.
Yeah,
We never made a profit.
no,
Oh, it's not.
no. And the $150,000
Don't even break even.
the $150,000 is based on what had been historically transferred the last few years before 2020 and 2021. And those years were tapered because we had less money in that account than what we had previously had. So,
And we actually saved money last year because we didn't have two of them.
So
We did lose.
pool improvements. So we had WTI and Confluence kind of work on an aquatic study for us. And that included a couple different components. One was to kind of give an assessment of the existing condition at the pool. So looking at our pool decking, our surface, our filters, our pumps, our chemical room or mechanical room, looking at all that and saying, okay, here's some things that you need to probably address for the next 15 years so that the pool continues to operate. And then also a component where they had these engagement boards that they put out to try to get people their interest level on future enhancements of what could we do at the pool as to make some changes. So this graph includes the total cost for all these things that are proposed on here. That total cost is $2.6 million. And the ring is basically the proportion of that. So the splash pad is 21% of that total cost, just to kind of get you an idea.
What's compliance inefficiency?
That is the catch-all for those things that probably are essential for us to do at the pool. Those include like pool and wall and floor repairs, updates to the chemical and storage room, sandblasting the pool and painting it, decking, caulking the deck and all that. I mean, that's that's kind of all wrapped up into that one item.
That's really maintenance.
Right, it's a, I guess I don't really want to think of it as deferred maintenance, because I think they've done a good job of
No,
taking
I
care of it.
think
It's
they
just,
have too, but
hey, the
it's
pool's,
funds.
it is 20+ years old, right? It's got some major maintenance items.
It
And
needs, that's right, it's not things you do on a year-to-year basis, and the time's here, it just needs to happen to get it done. Right.
And so then those other things are kind of either what I would say, updating existing amenities, or adding new amenities. So the splash pad would be an addition of them. And the thing is, I understand that the splash pad, you may not want to do the splash pad if you do the shallow and spray play area. You could do both because they are separate things, but you may say, you know what, we're not going to do the shallow and spray and play. We're going to just do the splash pad. We're not going to worry about the new shade structure. That's kind of the main one that's over there out in the middle of the pool, I think. But they also talk about adding additional deck shades so that it's more comfortable to set out there.
What's the name of that new addition you talked about?
The lazy river.
The lazy river.
Okay.
So the lazy river, that estimate to do one of those is $2.7 to $3.6 million. So when we were talking with them,
2 points to 3.
I told them, I said, well, that's probably not something that's going to happen. But I kind of talked to them about, you know, maybe that's something they've kind of got on the outside thing of the main part of that, because that may be something we want to go for, because that was by far the most popular thing on their engagement tool. Like, I would have to look, it was probably almost 10-to-1 type of.
Where would you put that?
Well, they had a general mock-up that they would put that on what is the southwest corner of the pool. It would be on the outside of the existing pool, but it would be on that southeast corner there, or
So
southwest corner.
Would it be connected with the pool?
It would be all fenced in together, but it wouldn't be, you wouldn't take up existing pool space to add. It would be a complete add.
A complete addition to.
It's basically, depending on how long it is, it's a thing you get on an inner tube, and it has current that floats you around, and
It's for the parents.
Anywhere you go, it's like.
Yeah.
I just never heard.
It's for the
Yeah.
parents.
yeah, but the one thing I talked to him about, I said, well, maybe that's something, depending on how we do our plan, we think, okay, we're going to try to do a community campaign for that. And if the community can raise half the money, then the council will pay half towards that project. But we know that that's probably going to be here somewhere between years 10 and 15. But that's how we could try to get that. I don't think we could bite off $3.6 million up front.
I was just gonna ask, a lot of that property excavation cost, is there any opportunity for synergy with other projects where they have to hold the away for that?
Oh, I would imagine there is, and I'm using these values are the high values. They had some lower values, but it was, if you added all those up, it was 2 million for all the GC up there. So with all this, I would rather say, just like with ball fields, I'd rather say it's going to be 7 and it comes back between 5 and 6 than say it's going to be 4 and it actually ends up being 6. So that's where my comfort level is on this.
Sid, how do other communities, does Spring Hill have one of them, a lazy river? How do they manage that? How? With their-
They have a what?
They probably did it all, I mean, they did it all when they built their pool. So that had to make it easier.
It's
So adding
something
it on with.
that came along after our pool was built.
They did it all initially when they did their pool.
This Lewisburg has one.
Don't think they do.
They,
No, I think maybe Gardner does. I don't think it was for
yeah, no,
Has one.
a lazy river.
Oh, I wonder what these kids would do if they had nothing down there but just water. And, I mean, that's what we had. We went every day. And
we had it.
they have to be entertained.
They had 2 diving boards and
16-foot diving board. we had.
and the slide.
Yeah. Breaking it.
That house was
I don't think it was
Yeah.
whatsoever.
And slipper slide. We had a big house.
12-foot diving board, 5-foot.
Nobody entertained anybody.
That's when Katie Wilson and them on the turn day.
But yeah,
You couldn't be on the bottom of it.
It's a different world.
But there, I mean, there, again, I think we've got some nice things at our pool, and that may be what we choose to go with. And I know part of that compliance efficiency, I think that also included some new steps for the slide structure. It needs some attention, but.
What's
There was
a
a
timing
comment.
system for slides?
Well, I think, so there's all kinds of options. And basically what these
So what
options
does
that
that
they have
mean?
on here are what when they looked at the results from the engagement side of it, said, okay, these are what kind of fit with what people were wanting. But it would just be like, you could race going down the slides.
Oh,
Hey, is there any way I could bid on that? I figured out that's 116,000. I've got the bid in
for what?
the time system.
There you go.
If you want me, I'll just throw that out there when it comes down to
Are
it.
you a licensed contractor in the city of Paola?
I'll find one. I'll give you 20%.
So, if you don't mind me asking, is a dual racing slide, the addition of 2 more slides off of the existing tower, is another tower that?
It would, I think that would be a separate, I don't have those details. I think that the idea is that be a separate thing. And a lot of those.
Where would they go?
Well, like that would almost, I think that would be a standalone feature. So it would have, it would feed out, it wouldn't go dump into the pool. It would dump into have its own kind of slow down lane. Because it's similar to, I mean, some of the early stuff that when Splash Tackler gave some ideas, they had they called it 4 tracks. It was their kind of racing slide. Then Lake Myola Dam, we've got the geotechnical back on that. We're going to be working to try to get engineering plans for the stabilization project, but we know that from our preliminary information that we got from McAfee and Henderson Solutions last year, that cost is estimated between $750,000 to $1 million.
Damn, all we got.
No. Do we have anything left in, what were we paying that out of before?
Well, we
Stormwater?
use,
Stormwater.
yeah, and we've
We
got.
don't have anything about.
We've got like, I think $200,000 or something in that. My concern is we have one major storm project we need to do, that's gonna be
You'll
gone.
need it.
Yeah,
What is that?
stormwater fund. So other considerations, what,
Around town here.
yeah. Is just thinking about, part of this sales tax was to go to streets. And then thinking about other parks, we have probably parks that, I think we have a lot of park ground. We probably need to think about the amenities that we have in our parks. Thinking of an ADA accessible play area. Know a community that put one in, it was several groups fundraising towards it, but it was about $250,000 to put that in. It was a very nice playground structure, but it was expensive. Connecting the trails, trail system expansion, all that kind of stuff. Anything else that kind of falls in parks is where I'm, thinking about what you have here.
The dam, the money for the dam won't come out of this money, will it? They have to say.
That's what I'm proposing that we look at doing. It's that's the largest park we have.
Right.
And recreational facility. And that dam is integral into ensuring that that stays that way.
Everybody's out in Lake Paola.
That dam is, there's been so much money spent on that dam through the years. It's just.
You know, drain the lake.
It just.
Drain the lake, take the dam.
Yeah.
It just always got something wrong with it.
Did they propose a useful, like how long it can go without maintenance, or does it require annual maintenance after, like if you did the 750 to $1 million, did they say that will set you up for 15 years or 20 years, or does it require?
Well,
annually?
that hasn't been detailed yet, because that's what we've done is, so we had some preliminary work done, and that was some historical information gathering and trying to work with KDA, I think, for the dam permitting process. Part of that said, hey, you need to have a geotechnical done so that you can really design a stabilization project that will get you fixed up in a sense. So that geotechnical study has been done. Now that next phase would be, okay, this is what a stabilization project is. And my part of that is yes, we want it to be a long-term fix. I don't, at that price tag, I don't want to spend that amount of money, have to turn around in 5 years and have to go out there again. And that's, we did some work out there in 14, we did some work out there in 16.
Yeah.
And we probably need to be doing work today out there, but we're trying to get all this coordinated to get it done right. Or at least as right as we can possibly make it, so that in the future it doesn't have issues.
Is there a certain time frame for periodic inspections right now through KDA?
Well, I think we're still on a normal 3-year cycle. I think we were kind of, Kirk and I were talking about that. I think we're actually due for one. And I don't know if they'll have us do that, or they know that we're in this process.
Right, I thought that's what we talked about. I just couldn't remember the timeframe between inspections.
Yeah, because the last one was done in 18. So, any questions? The one thing I've thought about doing is, we could definitely set up kind of a tour to go around to some of our parks and look at those parks, and to think about the assets that we do have and things that we might want to change to those parks as part of this conversation.
We have one park that's really not used. There's not much out there, and it's the one by the hospital. And I'm not sure it's because it's not really developed out there. Beyond the hospital, there's no housing, there's nothing. But that's a nice acre of land out there.
Where is that?
By the hospital, right around the corner there. On the
Well,
left, McIntosh, they gave that.
You mean where the, We All Michigan was built?
Yeah, it's
not, I didn't know that was it's not a park, really.
Yeah.
it is a park.
Yeah.
It's an historical
Yeah,
landmark.
yeah.
No, Mayor Floyd, he wanted that, and he talked to McIntosh and they sold that.
Yeah, I know.
And he got them to give that to the city, but there's nothing really.
I didn't know it was a park. I thought it was a historical landmark. I just thought.
No, it's a park.
There's several reasons they don't use it, doesn't have.
There's
out there for
Right,
one,
that's why I say
There's
there's
nothing going
nothing
on.
there.
and two, it's not walking distance for
No.
most people.
That's why I say there's nobody lives out there. It's not really a convenient place. But,
Well, in
I
another
don't
part that
know,
I,
we need to get people to go out there to use it.
Sid, was there anything else on that list of improvements that you had there that you envision potentially benefit for a capital campaign or something like that? Or community involvement, or if you just start assess that and all that stuff?
Well, I think the disc golf thing would be something that we could probably get some,
the one,
disc golf.
How much land do you need for that? I forget, I'm sure Aaron.
I'm not sure how much you would need.
We had, I'll have to get my, it's not that binder that we got a long time ago. It's quite a bit, but it's, can be with other things. It's not like it just has to be disc golf,
Right.
so you can put it easily on the part of the lake.
Your Honor, I wonder how strongly we're looking at these fluctuating sales tax because of COVID and how much internet sales tax is going to present an added benefit. I'm looking at that sales tax locally to really fluctuate.
and I missed this, what is it you were talking about?
Disc golf.
Disc golf. What is
Little
that?
wire baskets and you
It's
go.
frisbee
Frisbee.
golf. I use frisbees instead of
Special
golf
frisbees.
balls.
It's pretty popular.
Yeah, it is a popular thing.
And you're gonna have an area for that?
Somewhere
Somewhere?
Andrew Chapman, they went out to work in Wallace Park.
I just don't know if
So
I
it didn't have additional land costs, it was just putting the whole.
using
thing.
ones there.
And he actually had the layout, I think.
And the actual merchandise for it's not real expensive, so. I mean, you're not talking like $200,000 or $300,000.
And you can get full sponsors on those, probably.
You're talking about a minor
Disc.
loss.
Yeah.
Disc. Yeah, that's the,
But we have Southwest Park down there too. There's nothing there, is there? Isn't that the city, Southwest Park?
there's one down by the elevator.
No, Southwest, over there by the Legion,
Oh. The American
You
Legion.
mean the VFW?
or the VFW.
VFW.
Out there at the end
Jump.
of Maple Vista.
There's land out there.
There's land,
City,
but
but I don't think there's.
Yeah.
Don't
And
they
I
call
think
it
that was a
Southwest Park?
They may, but I don't think there's any equipment or anything.
No, there's nothing there. It's just like,
Correct.
Yeah,
it's right there on Bull Street.
and then the park out in Country Club Heights.
That would be used a lot, huh?
Whitaker, Petroleum.
Petroleus.
Wallace and the lake that actually have stuff to do on.
And we got the tennis courts up by North School.
Yeah.
That's not really a park, but people do use those.
Most people.
And Park Square, obviously.
Yeah. Still use it.
Yeah.
Most people have bought those at privately owned tennis courts. They bought match fees and never owned those tennis courts.
Yeah.
So to kind of talk about the sales tax, I know I've had concerns with COVID. We've had very strong months the last year. That's evident of kind of what we reported on. But our August one was kind of back down to normal. And so I don't know if we kind of hit that, the end of that good sales tax money, or if it was just a random month and it'll come back. But that's something that's why I think I put in the 800,000, flat 800,000. That's a very conservative number that I think we could probably manage through if we needed to, so.
Does the state, and I can't remember this, do they have a tax on stuff you order over the internet?
Yes.
They do.
Yeah.
So we do, that's something fairly new though, isn't it? We hadn't had that before.
They've had it before, they just finally put in a system where it's a little bit more enforceable. So they're putting it onto the businesses and they levy larger fines, et cetera, that make it to where businesses are facing more than tax, make sure they charge it to the end user.
And then, so we do benefit from that.
So if I get it shipped to my house, then the city gets,
Right, that's what I say, so we do benefit from that.
Right now, it's going off your social, your zip code.
So in line with that, I want to show another item that I developed as a tool to kind of help show some of this. So I've got, this is something that I think we can put out. I've got it'll be a link that I can share with council, and I think we'll put it on our website too. Has some instructions on it, and kind of just a brief introduction about the sales tax. I've got to work through if people want to save their work, what that looks like for them. So there's this initial page is just kind of your first page. There's a second page that goes through and shows all the kind of things that are items that you will see later in this tool. And you scroll down and you can see things that are tied to Wallace Park, tied to General Park. The things in red, I'm sorry that you can't see that real well.
Central, you got.
Right, I was trying to see if I can. Maybe I can't. I was gonna see if I could make the screen bigger. Those things in red are things that what I would say that we want to consider essential, and those were bond costs, and that's if we bond something. And my assumption is that we will probably end up bonding something. The value that is put in here for this is linked to that 1.6 for the 10. I realize that can come down if we bond less. But there again, this tool is just kind of made to help provide some scale for council and the public as they kind of look at this. That compliance and efficiency renovations at the pool, and then the Lake Dam stabilization project and the pool operations. So I have some of these other things on here is the fourplex at an alternate site fourplex at Wallace Park. It has all the pool items. I have a group of items that are called General Park Improvements A and B and C, and those are just individual numbers. Each one of those has like $1 million for A, $1 million, 1.5 for B. That's if people want to just make some general improvements to all the parks. Those are those things like updating a playground, piece of playground equipment, updating a shelter, things like that. I've got street improvements in here, just so if people want to identify the street improvements. There again, there's kind of just some generalized dollar figures with those. And I also have Wallace Park ball field. So if somebody says, I don't want a fourplex that's turf, but we want to do ball fields, here's how much money I think I want to spend on that option. But so the first kind of tool that you can utilize is one just to kind of look at pool costs. There again, this includes the Lazy River on here so that people can see what it's really going to cost them. And so as you click on these items, this is that compliance and efficiency. It says, so the graph on the top right, that shows that 100% of the cost that I have selected at $695,000 goes to that compliance and efficiency renovations. And by functional group, that's 100% down below. So let's say I want to add a splash pad to that. So now I'm at $1.2 million, and my costs are split about 55-45 between the compliance efficiency renovations and the splash pad. And that makes it between the compliance efficiency and a major amenity update or enhancement. So we're adding something new. That's the 44% of that is going towards a new amenity. If we do a frog slide update and say a new shade structure, this just starts building up kind of what those costs could look like. So people can visualize what these things are, what that means a little bit better. So then the next one is where we kind of put it all together. And you can select a inflate the estimation strategy that you want. That gives you your total revenue. And then you can start making selections on what you want to do with your money. And it splits it up into pool, the financing, the lake, ball fields, and parks. So if I do the fourplex at Wallace Park, and as you start getting close to numbers above the low estimate of the flat 800,000, that's going to turn yellow. And if you go above, say I want to do general park improvements of $1 million, I'm still below that high estimate of revenue, but if I go and add 1.5 in the streets, now I'm above. And you can start seeing the breakdown by category, what that cost is when we're looking at the total of that. This isn't a perfect tool, but my thought was is it is something that we can kind of put out there that people can kind of play with, and they can kind of see the same kind of questions and decisions that you guys are going to have to make based on the costs that we have. There again, these costs are those high estimates. I get that, so that can come down. So you may have 16, 17 million worth of costs in here, and we know that, okay, well, as things come down, we can probably fit that. But just trying to help people understand what we're trying to do with that sales tax.
How long are your estimates or what you come up with for cost? How long are those prices locked in?
Well, we don't have any prices locked in because we haven't, I mean.
So in other words, we haven't looked at it, like, say, we don't do anything for a whole year. Obviously, construction prices and everything's gonna go up. They never go down.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if we mess around with this forever, we may lose most of what we could do to inflation and to
I think that's a fair thing. That's kind of trying to work through this so that we're not having the same discussion 2 years from now. How are we going to spend this money? We've got so much in the bank now, but how are we going to spend money? Well, we've got our plan going. That's what I have. If council wants to go a different direction on that, I would be happy to take that direction. But I'm just thinking that we finally have some numbers of what all this can look like putting together. And it's not just as easy to just say we want to go build a fourplex, because that eats into a lot of what we anticipate getting. Do I think that fourplex could probably be built for less than the 7 million? I would hope so. I'd hope we could figure out ways to save some of that money, but I don't know that it's going to get down to 2.5 or 3.5. I think that's optimistic.
Can I ask a question? What, I have a couple of questions. Number one, what are you thinking the timeline is to leave this new survey open? This new questionnaire for people to do this. And then the second one is about the numbers for our funding. So,
Well, this isn't meant to be a survey necessarily. I think there's ways that you can go in there and make what changes you want to make and save those and print those down or print a report. My thought is this is more of as somebody's sitting there thinking, oh, why are they dragging their feet on doing this or doing that? They can go in here and look and they can start clicking the boxes and realize it's not just that easy.
So this isn't something that you guys are waiting on feedback from, it's just an informational tool so people can pile stuff in on a cart and see, okay, the give and take of the choices here.
Yeah, it's meant to be an interactive tool. If somebody wants to print out 20 scenarios and come into my office and discuss those, I'll sit down with them and go through those. But I don't imagine that'll be the case. I think I don't know, maybe nobody will use this. But I think some people could, and that way they've got those numbers and they can just click boxes because they got the totals right there.
Do we get their responses?
I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah. Is that, have you got that up on the internet?
Not yet.
No.
The plan is to get it on the internet. I'm gonna try to also do a quick YouTube tutorial on it, just so people can understand how to use it if they want to. And if it gets used, it gets used. If it doesn't, you know.
We did this, the comprehensive plan did the survey. And we spotted, according to what you told us, it was a good estimation of what people wanted.
Yeah. Well, and I think
Why are we
also,
going off what that is?
well, I think one thing is then when we got the price for the fourplex at Wallace Park, and it was $7 million, and $1 million was for just dirt movement, and another 500,000 for general site prep. I think that was my understanding. Council said, okay, well, we probably need to take a step back and see if there's an alternate site makes sense. And also, my understanding is there was a lot of feedback about once people saw the price about, hey, you're going to spend that much money down where there's a floodplain. And I think they're, again, taking that step back to find out and do our due diligence. Is there a different place to put this? I think that's all part of this conversation. I realize that we're not to a project yet, but I think we have to do these things. Otherwise, we're going to leave ourselves out hanging. And that's my professional opinion on that.
I think it would be good for us to use this before we come together again and say, this is kind of what I'm thinking. Because we've all had feedback from different people, and I think it would be good for, if the community wants to go in and see how we have to figure this out, it's a good tool for them to, if they want to use it, they can. But I think as we work through the process, if we could all get on here and do this, come together and say, this is what I think is gonna work, then I think it would be, I like this idea for my own use.
There's some things that's pretty logical. Number one, you have to spend the money on that pool maintenance. You don't have a choice there.
Yeah.
Number two, you've got to arrive at a decision for the location of that ball field where you can move forward.
Mhm.
I mean, those are pretty elementary. There
I
are
think that's
basic
right, yeah.
things that have to be done.
Mhm.
And then you can put in the rest of the dam. It's got to be done.
Right.
You've
Yeah,
got-
there's certain
you've
things
got
I-
three things there
Yeah.
that have to be
Right.
done.
And I really
You've
like
got
what you've done.
location, the pool maintenance, and you've got that
Right.
done. And those are things that are pretty elementary.
Mhm.
And the rest of this, you can put in according to what you can afford to do.
Mhm.
So
But there
I
are
would
certain
be,
things that have to happen.
I would almost prefer it if you look at this and say, okay, we know the pool maintenance, we know what has to be,
Yeah.
the
that's
bare
gotta
minimum,
move.
what has to be
Yeah.
done. So that shouldn't even be an option to take that out. Because we know if we don't do that, we're gonna have to close the pool.
Right.
Yeah.
So we
have
know
no
we have to
choice.
do that.
Mhm.
We know we have to do the dam.
That's
And
not a
there's no
choice
place
either.
else we're gonna be able to get $1 million to do the dam. So we
That's
know
right.
that has to be done. And we know either way, there's gonna be a tremendous amount of work done either at Wallace Park or another location. So there's certain, I mean, that cost, I
But
think,
we
you're
need
right.
to,
we need to
reach a
determine
resolution on the location.
Yes.
the
And
location
move forward,
and then
and I
move
think
forward with
people will
that
be
based on
okay
that.
with what you reach, but you have to reach a resolution.
Yep, and I think this is a good for us to make some decisions.
Well, I'd make mine.
I've already made mine.
Well, because it does, it brings everything, it makes it pretty clear. And the problem is, we're already starting to see the sales tax taper off.
Mhm.
So we absolutely have to use the $800,000 a year number, because even if it falls below that, we're on the hook.
That's right.
Now, year five, we're going like gangbusters, and we know we're gonna have tons of money left over, or we're able to, maybe bond some more, or, right, you can add more in year 5, 6, 7, and know that, hey, we've got plenty of money now, we're gonna be able to do what we want to do with streets, we've got money set aside for the different parks and areas like that.
If we need to buy park equipment, then
But
we
I-
have additional.
Right, but I get really leery when we start looking at the numbers and they're already starting to taper off. You know,
I was just going to say that, you know, this is a good tool for the council to use. What I believe you're trying to do, Sid, is show the public that these are the difficult decisions that the council has to make.
Exactly.
It's nothing to do with comprehensive plan or any of that. It's just,
Right.
this is the money, maybe, and how are we going to spend it?
because when you start seeing those numbers out in public and people start saying, you're spending how much on what? And it's like, well, wait a minute. Here's everything, here's what we want to do, and here's how much money we have, you tell me how we split it.
Well, you can get all of this for $2.5 million for the pool, or you can get this one thing, or maybe
Yeah.
that later.
Yeah, you
You
could get
know,
Lazy River or all this
or
other stuff.
everything.
Right, or maintain the pool and everything, right,
Well, I like the idea of, I was talking to Sid, I don't like having to finance stuff, but sometimes I think people pass this tax in 19. They want to see some action, they want to see their money go to work.
That's what we did with our public buildings.
Yeah.
It worked out and everybody was thrilled. We
Yeah.
worked on them. We approached them.
So I think
This
we do
has
some
to be
big
done.
projects
We're
now.
building the building.
Mhm.
and then I think we have to, I
Yeah.
don't think you can, I don't think you can spend $800,000 a year and make a difference.
Or just
No,
wait.
right.
You are
wait
going
on
to
that,
have
right.
to do it.
Uh-uh.
And you have to.
Or you're not gonna
temporarily
get
know
it, you won't get the next sales tax passed if you do that way.
If you temporarily do it, then you just roll it into a bond.
Well,
Yes.
if-
Well, that is something, as we get a little, that conversation, okay, these are the things we want to do. We can visit with Greg Bernberg, because there's a lot of different tools of like, okay, what's the best way for us to do this? Because as we go into a project, we may want to temporary note it just so that we can get it going and get it started.
That's
Then,
right.
once we have the full costs known, then we bond that out, but we know we're still kind of in the same scale of what we originally thought versus, hey, we go out and bond $8 million and we only needed to bond 6. And then we're like, well, we lost some money on finance on that.
But that's what we did with our buildings. We started with the police department, the justice center is number 1. We built that, flew into the community center, city halls, the library, and we added them on as we went. And
So-
it worked out.
We knew what we were spending on, what we were doing.
Right, that's right.
And I
We
agree.
didn't try to do them all at once. I mean, we used to move.
I agree, we need to use a safe figure,
I agree. A
the
safe-
safe figure on what, so that we're
It's
not
better
gonna
than
put ourselves in a
underestimate
bind
and
if
overestimate.
that's changed.
Keep you out of jam.
And we know what has to be done.
That's the problem, that's what COVID threw this whole thing into a mess here. And you can only do so much, your wisest thing is half bond, half cash, you have that as one of the options there. You put it all
A question or a couple of questions. Number one, obviously, we talked about materials, cost, et cetera. But have you looked at just in today's estimates, not even factoring in time value of money? One of the options on the pool don't have an upcharge if you go standalone. Like, are all these options that you have to do in one project to get some efficiencies and savings? Or is it, hey, if we decide that the sales tax is producing in 5 years, we have the opportunity to put in dual racing slides and besides inflation or time value of money, we haven't lost anything, they do that standalone. There's no.
That's the cool stuff is standalone, because it's been all along like, hey, I need to know what an option is.
So it's all
Yeah,
part.
this is, yes.
You're looking at an ROI.
What's that?
You're looking at an ROI, return on investment.
No, I wasn't even looking at from that standpoint, I was just looking at that we could do it now versus later.
Do
And
some
not
now,
have a
some-
ton of additional costs for putting it off.
Yeah, and I think something that, I mean, at the pool, you know, you do you put your, those, kind of maintenance items, you do that. And I think we should think about some sort of enhancement there. We don't have to, but in my mind, I think you do that in a splash pad. That's it's a chunk of change, but it's not the lazy river. And you do that now, and you know that, okay, we've got these things, we're doing some, maybe, I mean, we need to kind of, it's not as part of the maintenance items, but like updating the frog and updating some of the floats, we probably would need to do that as well. But, you know, you have a chunk that you do at the pool now. And you know that if the sales tax performs, that maybe in year 5 or 7, we have enough money saved back that we can put in slide system, or we're putting in something else.
Don't do it all now, and in 2 or 3 years, they will
Plus-
appreciate getting something additional.
Right, plus you
Yeah.
give that reward more than once than
Yeah, they get it
all up
all
front.
through, and then maybe 2 or 3 years, they get something else, and then
Yeah.
another couple of years, depending on what you have available.
Yeah. Car.
Yeah. But
Well,
like I
and that's
say, the
honestly,
thing
when
you
you look
can't-
at
you
the
can't
pools
do-
around us, when you add a new feature, you get an influx for a little bit, and somebody else adds something new. And you lose your people back again, and it's just the locals, and so that's a way to take it
That's
out.
right.
But another question is, or something to consider is, right now, the benefit financing for the jobs that you want to do that are bigger and make a bigger splash, rates are as low as they've been in 30 years. I mean, they haven't touched this. And the thought process is for the Fed is they're indicating they're going to try and push that up. So you want to have your decision before that, because quarter point makes a big difference. But then the other questions that I had, I didn't want to interrupt your presentation on the ballpark section. You had, I think it was like 7.5 or 7.6 versus, well, long story short, they were both over 7 million Wallace Park versus offsite, and as you pointed out, difference. But I didn't see the site acquisition in that number. So we have a separate site acquisition.
It's basically just figuring that we could get either
So-
one of those projects for 7.1. And I took the alternate site down because I felt like 7.1, it makes it that those are more equal as far as, hey, we're getting a fourplex. Whether it's here or there, we probably can do it for the same time.
So you were saying, I don't want to assume, I think I missed a piece of that. You're saying that in that number that you have for the alternative site, you're factoring in the acquisition cost over the other categories, or you're saying it needs to be added?
I'm saying that what I have for this estimate on here, for this tool, is that if the pricing for whether that fourplex ball field is at Wallace Park or at an alternate site is the same. It's 7.1. There again, I could be wrong. It could end up being 7.5 because we had $400,000 worth of site acquisition. I'm just trying to say, all things fairly equal, those two projects would be about the same price.
So you just did that to simplify the tool, so they're not worried about, okay,
Right.
what does it cost here versus what does it cost here? You just put in a price and said, okay, here's the cost for a fourplex. No, and we know that the alternate site location doesn't include land cost, and it also includes the $300,000 adder, which the Wallace Park field does not. But that's on this number, not on it.
Yeah. Do you want me to get you signed up on the internet so you can do this?
I'll have to sit by you,
Okay.
and we can do this together.
Okay.
We'll have it together.
Sorry to drop 3 questions on you, just have one more. The dam, you know, when we kind of talked, when you guys have talked in the past, you've looked at the things that were just kind of a luxury item, kind of like the pool where we have it, we know it's gonna lose money and have a bunch of maintenance, but we want to have it just for the rest of it, whatever. but trying to keep everything in its own bucket. With the community of voters that we have, and I used to be very much in it, and I know like as a voter, I looked at it. We're so low on our fees. Do we have any plan that we're hoping to put in place so that if/when in 20 years, even if like they did the dam, it looked like it set us up for 20 years with no maintenance, do we have something to adjust for the wear and tear that's being caused? Like, and I'm not saying to take the boats off, I'm not for that, but I know like I've got a whole bunch of friends out there whose boats range from 20 to 80, some even over $100,000, and they've got $40,000 docks out there. And our cost for somebody to put the boat on for a whole summer is like $225. And that's a question that I'd ask, have we looked at adjusting that fee structure up? Because I can tell you when I was a voter, and I can't speak for everybody, but I'm pretty confident in your core group out there. When I was a voter, I say our cost to put it on our water lease spot, our two sides of the dock were $2.25 a piece, and they included our boat in there. I think it's actually still the same, you get the discount for your boat. My question would be, have you looked at increasing that? Because there's so much investment there. They're not gonna bail on it, but it might help to fund what they're doing with the boats. Because like we used to go out, we used to wakeboard and surf, and we had ballast in there, etc. That create the additional waves, which are causing your erosion issues and such that we'll have to deal with at some point, not even counting the dam. So that's my question is, are we looking to build a bucket for the next time, or is it something that we're gonna hope to slide into a sales tax? I feel like right now we're kind of behind the eight ball. We have to address it, but to keep that from happening going forward, do we have any ideas? there?
Adjust
Is that something
fees.
to talk about?
Is that what you're saying, adjust the fees?
That or
I think the
what we
one,
gotta do to make sure that we're not looking, because I'm hoping that I live another 20 to 25 years, and that my kids are in my position in 20 to 25 years. And I'm just looking at, what are we doing to make it to where when they want to do other enhancements like the pool or like the ball fields, that they're not having to give up a piece of the pie because because you're stuck, like you didn't have the opportunity to plan for what you walked into on the dam. Like that was decisions that's been made for the last 30 years, you know.
well,
Moving forward, what are we gonna do to keep from being in this position?
I think ultimately trying to have that lake be somewhat self-supportive is what we need. But there again, it may end up being kind of like the pool with the operations that we don't want to raise the prices high enough to be able to support all that. I think ideally that's the way that is. If we want to add campgrounds, we've had increased, we use those camping fees to offset that new expansion. But right now, we're not quite there. I don't know, I haven't put a pencil to that operation, but I would imagine we probably lose money at the lake.
Well, no, and that was, I guess where I was going with that is, right now, if you have no boats on the lake, just typical a pond sitting there, a lake sitting there, it's like, would probably be 4 to 5 times as long as with what we have going on with boats. And so that was my question is.
But I don't think that the problem that we have at the dam,
Not the dam.
that we would have to address that whether we were going to keep boats on that lake or not.
Agreed.
And so, yeah, I mean, we're kind of getting down in the weeds of the lake operations, but I think ultimately, yes, ideally, you try to have that as an operation that can support itself. And
No, I didn't mean to take you down a rabbit hole. This is a good time to ask so that as we plan for the future, because I don't know that I'm coming to a whole ton of meetings and it's something that hasn't been addressed for a long time. It hasn't been raised for 20 years. And that's what I just look at and I think, okay, we're going to be staring down the same barrel in 15 to 20 years. If it's not the dam, it'll be the erosion issue where you have to do clean out or dredge or whatever. And that's what I'm looking at, is your average cost of your dock, if you went out there, is between 25 and 50 grand. And so if you average that and you think that the slice of the city's getting off of that is 240 for each spot, that just seems like that we're not putting ourselves in a position to maintain that and protect ourselves from the things. Sorry,
We started looking at that this year.
Yeah, we made some adjustments to that. I think part of the concern with the voting is the enforcement of, we would rather have people be permitted so that we know that we've gotten some money out of it than it gets too high. The concern is they're just gonna get on the water and we don't really have a way to police that.
So I was talking more, and that's where I think I got our lines crossed. I'm not talking about the voting permits, I'm talking about the water lease rights that.
The dock fees.
docks.
Well, and I think, I mean,
Because the
but I think all those play together to get you to that point where you're able to fund. If you're going to do an improvement at the lake, it's funded by the revenue that it generates.
Yeah, but as far as the enforcement of the boats, that is hard. You have to have somebody watching the binoculars to chase the boats down, but the fees, you're able to say, hey, we got 60 docks and they all pay their fees, and that's not that hard. But yeah, sorry.
Any other questions on this? I'm hoping that it'll be up. I've got to do some internal testing. Yeah, I hope to have it so that it's up by the meeting next, or by the council meeting on Tuesday.
Do you have any updates as far as the other site? Like, are we getting to the point where we could say, okay, we want to do it here or here?
I will provide some additional information.
Because I think that's gonna be key, is we've got to make a decision what it's gonna be. And like I said, I love what you've done here. I think it's great, but I would definitely put the $1 million for the dam in there as, you can't take that out. That's got to be spent. The maintenance for the pool, and, you know.
You're talking to somebody who doesn't know how to program and that. I tried to figure out how I could make that like pre-selected, and I can't figure out how to do that yet.
What's it?
We're adding.
What's it?
I'm using Google Data Studio, so I'm pulling data from several different spreadsheets into here. And
Why don't you just put on this what's optional? Just put, this is not optional. The dam and the pool maintenance, those are things that there's no option on.
well, and I tried to do that with
Pool is a
the red
slide.
highlighting and the asterisks, and those are the first ones that are on there. That was my workaround for that.
Well, I was telling Sid, whenever people maybe look at this, they won't be overly excited about saving money on the streets, because our streets aren't that bad. But if they were bad, it would be at the top of the list.
Let me tell you.
But they don't understand the value of just maintenance. You know, because they don't,
Even have the alleys too.
you know, they don't see,
Yeah.
it's not exciting like a pool feature.
When we actually put this up, we just threw the streets on it for if there was extra money. Because we had to have some place we could use it if we had extra money, so we added the streets.
Which I think that's why we normally have in our mind that we go with the low estimate, the 800,000 or whatever, and then as it comes in higher, that usually is what goes to streets.
It was like we did when we did the buildings.
Right,
They threw in parking lots as an add-on, so that if there was money left over,
right,
we had something that the voters voted on. We could put the
because you can't use it for it otherwise.
Right, exactly.
Right, so you have to have a place to use it.
Yeah.
That's what it was for.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like
Residential
we have
streets and parking lots.
having more than enough use for the money.
Yeah, it's gonna get,
Well, that's one more question that I will leave, so you don't have to worry about any more questions, which I'm sure will be celebrated. But have we considered, based on feedback that you're getting on things that people want? On the survey, you know, they prioritized, and we got overwhelming feedback and confluence kind of presented, like pool ball fields. Have we considered looking at an 8th or a 16th even to fund some of these other projects and actually put them on a ballot so that people have the opportunity to decide, would we be willing to do that? Would we be willing to fund those operations? Because right now, that's the one thing that I see when I look at this is we took something that was presented and voted on with 2 to 3 things in mind when we presented it, and we're trying to fix every problem that we have in the city right now for streets, parks, whatever. Don't get me wrong, it's a great opportunity to do some things that we have to, but it wasn't how it was presented. And if we feel like that stuff that's important that people would support, would we even consider that as another option?
But I guess I would say that's how it was presented. Pools, parks, and streets. And I think we keep getting the ball fields mixed in with parks, and ball fields are part of parks. Parks are not part of ball fields. So when we talk about the money, and that's where I think we're having the big issue is that huge amount of portion is just for ball fields. And we've got a lot of other park areas that need work. So I don't think we can say we sold this as ball field upgrade sales tax. Ball fields were part of parks.
Well, I can
But
tell you, if you
all
look at
fields-
your numbers, the people who took the survey, your numbers of people that voted,
I understand.
we
that.
can
Look at-
account for how it was presented, and I bet if.
But look at the way the sales tax, look at the way the sales tax wording was written. It didn't say ball fields, it said parks.
And
So we need to be careful and make that distinction there, and I'm not saying that we don't need to do something with the ball fields, we do. But we can't look at it as, well, that's the way it was presented. The sales tax question was very specific about pools, parks, and streets.
So-
And I
You
will,
mentioned
excuse me,
education.
wait just a second. One thing I want to make a point of too is that survey was about Wallace Park and a sports complex. That was kind of the guiding of that. It wasn't to be comprehensive of all of our parks. It wasn't even really to talk a whole lot about the pool. So I think we need to say that overwhelming, when you're focused on one thing, yeah, it's going to be overwhelming of, yes, that's what we want, but we didn't have all this other information that was part of that survey. So I think the concern that I would have with an additional sales tax is you look at where we are in the state of Kansas, when 6.5% off the top goes to the state. And so we don't have, and then you got the counties in there and you got ours, there's not a lot of room and we're already bumping up to 10%. And then you start thinking, okay, do people make a choice based on sales tax and where they shop? I think there's potentially opportunity there, but I think we also got to be cautious that, oh, we're going to solve the next problem with the sales tax. Because that's kind of what the state does. They have a problem with revenue and they say, well, we'll increase the sales tax. Well, then that eats into what cities can actually tap into, because we're limited to sales tax and property tax primarily for our kind of governmental funds to generate revenue. Otherwise, it's our enterprise funds have a user fees, but it's property tax and sales tax. So.
But when you mentioned how it was presented, that falls just like when we talked about, we have to educate them on the rec commission is separate from the ball field proposal, that it's an education thing. That's what we did when we presented, because like everybody in this room, I think if anybody pretends that we're expecting the layman is going to read from start to finish the sales tax proposal, or if they're going to take their city council and the people who are presenting to them, they're going to take the people who are presenting to them. They're not going and doing the homework. That's a big problem nowadays, but it's just the way it is. So when we talk about how it was presented to them, yes, I know what the wording is, but I also know Jay and I pushed it pretty hard, and we weren't alone. Like there's 3 people in this room that were there with us that pushed it the same way. And it's not to say, I'm not pushing that you guys spend 7 million or even 5 million on a complex. All I'm saying is, I don't want to end up to where it becomes the afterthought in this whole thing, which is kind of how it started to look. And based off of being one of the people that pushed it with Jay and with the other people in this room, I'm just trying to remind you guys how we got it passed. Because that was the concern, and that's what we pushed to get it passed, was that it would pass stand alone with the pool.
Well, with all due respect, I think we haven't pushed the ball to the back burner. It hasn't been something that has been forgotten. We've been talking about it for a while, and we continue to talk about it. We've got 2 proposals for large fourplexes there. The alternative is if we don't, which is included in this, is we know we need to make an investment at some level in the ball fields. We know that. What that is what we're trying to get figured out.
No, like I told you on the phone, I appreciate where you're at. You guys have a hard decision. My concern is just, there's when you listed that off, if we're talking about $10 million of operating after financing cost structure.
If we bonded
Yeah, if we
the
bond.
max amount.
So just on that hypothetical, the concern is, okay, so if we put, being conservative, $1 million to the lake dam, and we put 7 to 8 million in the pool.
I don't think we've talked about putting 7 to 8 million in the pool.
Well, you have 2.6 on the.
On the one, and we've got the lazy river, and we do have it included in this, but the idea is that that's not really an option that is going to be considered.
No, I was talking about the rate where you had all the things that you were doing. The
That would do
2.6.
2.6.
Then we had what was it? The 2 million and change for the maintenance.
The
But
operating.
that was
operating
taken,
cost
that
was
was taken out before the 10 million.
Right, so you're not talking, if we don't do the lazy river, we do everything else, you're talking 2.6 million.
Yeah, at the pool. If you did max everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, some of those,
You have to do.
If we did everything.
yeah, if we did everything on that list besides this.
I think everybody knows that some form of the ball field is gonna take a big chunk. And some form of the pool is gonna take a big chunk. I think everybody's on the same page. I think the main thing's gonna be figuring out what else we wanna do where.
Where it's gonna locate it, how we do the everything else.
Yeah, we got 3 big items and the rest of it, you figure it out.
Because I think people probably and that's why I like the idea down the road of doing the Lazy River capital or campaign, because people are excited about it, but they may not have any idea what that was gonna cost.
Well, because most people don't even realize that the pool loses money.
Right.
You talk to everybody and they're like, the pool
Yeah.
loses money.
So I think that that's something that, we know it was number one, but we're gonna look at it down the road when we see where our sales tax is at.
Just because of the sheer cost, but we can have these other features for
Right.
much less money.
We
and
can get
still
more
make
bang for our buck right now and do everything else, or if we do, we might have to do everything else, but everything else
You
was,
can choose the
Right.
other things as to how they fit in.
and even if you did all of them, it's still less than the Lazy River by itself.
Yeah.
So I think people will understand that.
Beat that horse to death.
I think,
I think I'll leave it just to how I'm done. I don't know about the rest of it.
well, the rest of it is mostly just items that we've got on slate for the agenda. Did you have any questions on those? I will just speed that one up. If you have questions, I'll answer those. If not, we'll just.
Based on the current budget, the way it's written right now, what's the mill levy?
Give me just a second. I think it ended up being slightly higher because I had to adjust the libraries up because our motor vehicle tax went down and their library grant is tied to the amount of tax revenue that they generate. And because motor vehicle went down, we had to adjust but give me just a second.
Well, if you can just email me that.
Okay.
That's fine.
No, I know too.
Oh, sorry.
And I want to know what it's.
I'm sorry, I opened that can of worms now. Here we go.
I want to know what the bill.
Just put your name on the email too.
Yeah, there, you just send it to
That's a
me.
good idea.
When I do that, I have to go up and sits here and I sit here.
Reserve a computer at the library.
No, we use the big one in the conference room with the great big screen.
Give me just a second.
Going back to the other thing that we just finished talking about, we thought,
Did you,
I think as long as we make some decisions and they're thought through thoroughly, and we can defend our decision, everybody's gonna be fine. They just want something done at the pool, and people want ball fields, so
You don't know, ever said the word me.
they don't call me.
They can't get me.
So,
Okay, I get plenty of feedback.
yeah, I do too,
Do you really?
so.
Yeah.
The only ones I get that they stop me, they ride in the car. Once it ride in the car, don't care. Once the law, as long as they're machine.
You got the luxury of not doing email,
Yeah.
because people,
I know.
when they can do it without talking to you,
Oh, no,
They-
they're gonna talk to me.
but what I'm saying is when they can do it when they're not having to talk to you, they get a lot more vocal and express their opinions to where they wouldn't if they were in your.
I've had several conversations with individuals wanting to know who from the city is going to go down to Lacey and pick up our turf when it floats away when the ball's parked. I'm like, I don't know, but we're gonna create a new position just for that.
Right, that's what I tell them too, yeah.
so,
I'm from Lacey, I got you.
I think, I haven't seen, I didn't look at what we published.
I did.
It was 43.390, I think.
Okay, that's, I was
And,
thinking.
and
it's
so
23.4.
we are 0.009 above what we were last
It's
year.
43 what?
It's 43.390.
Okay, and what's that? What's the mail?
And the 2021 or 2020, what we're under this year, I always get, because it's the 2020 mill levy, but it's for this budget year, was 43.381.
But it's gonna look,
But the revenue
Like, we're
neutral rate
raising
was
it.
like 49 or 39.
yeah.
Right,
It's gonna look
yeah.
like we're raising it.
Right.
But we're not.
No.
But when you get
Based
your
on-
tax bill, it's
Yeah.
gonna be up.
Oh, I know.
The revenue neutral rate calculation, that's
Blame the people paying too much for the
That's-
houses that are for sale.
That's when I will hear it.
People are paying too much for that.
People don't pay around, give them their tax bill, you hear it. I'll hear that.
Any other questions?
I was gonna ask, about the housing. See, instead of,
Mhm.
I mean, I can't remember that type of, or getting 10. It seems like a good year.
Well, we had 9 last year and we got 10 this year. I'm not sure what we've had in some of the other years, but
I think we need to continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
it's been
so.
good.
Yeah.
Is it still geared toward trying to encourage that? Because it was.
yeah, it's
The kind of
tiered.
mid-range.
It's
What-
like if you are in that 100 to 210 range,
Yeah.
it's, you get a higher percentage of those discounts. And then
Right.
if you're in that
the cost.
210 to 300 range, it's a little bit more.
Okay, that's what I
Above
thought.
300, it's.
I like how it is.
The only other question I had was on the 401 East Gas Cascade. Is there a date that the house has to be demolished?
I don't know that we have, I'm trying to think if we gave them a date. Have to look at the last letter.
Okay.
The plan is we have communicated with them that, hey, we're moving, this is what's gonna happen, you have to, you have the opportunity to demo it yourself, or we will.
And they have pulled a permit. to
They have
demo it?
pulled a permit, there is a demo permit pulled for that address. So but we kind of wanted to do this so that if we felt like we had somebody ready to go.
Right.
If we need to have it ready to go.
But you didn't, do they have a time frame?
I think we gave them until, I'd have to look, but I actually think we gave them until like this Friday to let us know what their plan is. If they haven't communicated that, we still go through with this and then we will make plans.
Does that include tearing the garage down or just the house?
I think we planned on tearing everything down.
Supper coming. Is my supper coming? Someone order out there.
They're getting angry.
I'll have to-
So-
3 in the afternoon.
Are we going on down the list or what?
Well, I was just, if you had specific questions, I would answer those. Otherwise, it just as a matter of time, just going with what we got.
When are we gonna vote on Lake Miola, the sampling program?
The plan is that would be
Next
Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got that agreement. I've got some feedback from Lee, which I think most of that stuff is just standard, making sure that, hey, have you thought about that? That's-
Did you read that article I wrote you about the goats?
Yeah. That is one thing. KGS, the Kansas Gas Service franchise, we may move just because Lee's still reviewing, and if we have anything that we're gonna try to communicate back with them, that might take longer than a week.
Okay.
What's that?
The franchise agreement with Kansas Gas Service,
Number 5 on the list.
we may need that to October. It's just, needs to be done. Yeah, because I think it's December before it would expire in December before we. So.
The article I took to Sid is about a lady in the city that has a goat farm. She takes her goats and the different communities live next to it and then rent those goats.
For yoga?
Huh?
For yoga?
I've seen that.
For, to help keep them. And it was not.
They do that in Atlanta quite a bit because of cousin times.
So instead of sending somebody a letter to mow their yard, they wake up one morning, there's a couple of
Get
goats.
it. Their yard's fenced in, there's some goats.
They
Sorry,
have different places they
we'll
can.
be back in a month.
Right, right.
And this lady does, she has a goat farm and she rents the goats out and takes care of them and it's for that. And they are around the water, the lakes, on.
They do have goat yoga as well.
And they eat poison ivy, they eat briars, they eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything.
Isn't that interesting though? So I thought, you know what, we're lucky there.
Should be real clean then.
Oh, we're selling the goat, we're selling the lawnmower, buying it. Pretty common.
You don't leave much left of your.
I've been.
Is there anything?
I've been.
The guy across
Tell
the
it right.
street used to have a goat.
Yeah. Go down on that tree stop and.
Because this thing, but I just read that, I thought, what? And I read that article, you did, I just walked right up, I said, I get as much news out of the paper as you that's hassle.
Any other questions?
I want to bring up something.
Okay.
Okay, I've talked to Sid about this before. I'm just gonna throw this out. I think it's something we need to think about. And it's about tiny houses, train box cars, and recycled shipping containers for people wanting to put them on properties in the city limits of Paola. And it's happening other places, and I think we need to be proactive and figure out what we want to do.
You want to encourage that?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I don't. And the county has already, they already have.
The container homes, right?
They have a containers home policy. And
don't ours, does ours include anything to address that? Sid?
we have lowered the square footage of our lots. And these,
Well,
No, we didn't.
well. we
people
did
could
for-
build on those if they got a variance. We just
Right.
simplified the process so that staff could approve
I
building
But
on
it still
that.
doesn't mean
But
it
that's-
can be approved.
I'm just saying, I think we need to discuss this because this is a coming thing. And there's a lot of cities in Kansas that are allowing them. And I personally think they should be limited to certain areas. And I don't think
How are you
anybody,
gonna limit them to certain areas?
if we have a policy
Isn't that discrimination?
against the house,
Against the private neighborhoods? I mean,
I don't think
does it decrease your
We
property
keep,
values?
we keep single wide trailers out.
Well, you're not supposed to live in your camper either.
Well, no. We got a few of those going on,
Yes, we do.
and we don't do anything about it.
We're trying to address those that you have raised.
But I'm just saying, I think that we need to educate ourselves as to what these tiny houses and the train boxcars and the recycled shipping containers are, and the possibility of what we might want to do about it.
Would they even be able to put them in as our code reads now?
I would have to.
Especially the
visit-
shipping containers.
I think you'd run into a hard time of them meeting the structure requirements that we would require. Same thing with what I would consider a true tiny house is, our minimum is 960 square
Yeah.
feet. I don't consider that a tiny house.
But they do, and Google considers it
Well,
up to 1,000 square feet.
But I
It can be
guess-
2 stories.
but I feel like a 960 square foot house is a small house that somebody could build and be a starter home for them. Is a lot different than putting a 400 square foot or 110 square foot house on a lot.
It could be a retirement home,
Yeah,
where they downsize.
Yeah.
I don't,
You know, the house across the street from me, I think is 800 square feet. And I'm not sure what Don's is, but it's not much.
And that's even smaller than our minimum now.
But those have been there, that's the old
Yeah.
part of town.
Yeah,
yeah.
but I'm saying
I know
that
my house is
anything,
like 150.
even those are bigger
160
than what I would
years
say
old.
is a tiny home.
Hmm?
I said even those are bigger than what I would
Yeah,
consider
they're
a tiny
bigger
home.
than-
So maybe that's just a conversation we can have with Bill and see what, just to verify that
Yeah.
the cargo containers and the box cars would be excluded, that they wouldn't be able to do that. And then take a look at the wording for the square footage of the house, because somebody could come in with a.
Where I see you might have a problem is the cargo containers that they're using for like sheds now and stuff.
yeah,
Because they're so much bigger.
Yeah.
I could see those being,
Yeah,
I'm trying to bring those in.
the tiny homes wouldn't even, I wouldn't think they are minimum.
Yeah, because right now you don't have to have, it's 100 square feet or less for a shed, you don't have to have a permit for it, I think.
Yeah.
And
I
anything-
think
So they would have to get a permit.
They would have to get a permit and we could review it at that time, and it's gotta be a specific shed.
I think it would meet, there'd be some structure
Right.
challenges for that.
well, the county thought that it was necessary to have some regulation, and I just think we should think about it.
Yeah, the county's got a lot of area out there to cover though.
Or they're allowing the shipping containers, I think. That's what I thought.
But
They
they have to be,
Yeah.
Yeah, they gotta be a certain
If they have to-
size and,
and you have to have so much acreage,
right, yeah.
and they're, I didn't know it was shipping containers, it was more a boxcar.
Almost the same
Right.
size.
That I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
That-
it's almost the same.
Ones we've been seeing have no wheels or never have had wheels, and they're not the back of trucks, they're just,
They're old semi trailer, like separate.
they're kind of like a semi-trailer, but they're actually just made for storage.
Yeah,
They're like they're bringing home the boats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's exactly what they are.
and they'll put them on trains and then they'll take them off trains, and they've got like kind of dollies that you can then
Mhm.
truck them, but
Yeah.
it's,
Well, and the county may have had to do something because they're gonna allow them. If they weren't gonna allow them, the county.
Because we're seeing a lot of them in town, it's just portable ones that are just for people to move their stuff
Well,
in
yeah,
and take out.
Just pods.
yeah.
yeah.
Like I say, out in the county, they're actually using them instead of sheds, because they're almost bulletproof.
Well, and they're not, at least at one point, they weren't real expensive.
Right.
No, they're not. The high school has got one out in their back parking lot that they made up in shop class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's sat there for quite a while, I'm not sure what they're.
They were, each class every year adds a little bit more to it until they get it It's got, I think they're wrapping it up this year.
What were they were gonna donate that?
Donate it to Veterans
I
Village
thought-
or something.
Yeah, like in Kansas City or
Yeah,
something.
Kansas City has a.
Kansas City,
tiny house.
Missouri.
They have a
Tiny house
veterans
community for
for
vets.
veterans, yeah, and I think that's where it's going, when it's done.
Yeah, they've been promoting this up there for veterans.
And that's where I see tiny houses being good.
Yeah, definitely. And in a
Because it gives these
a certain
people
area.
Get them off the street to where they actually got the facilities. and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right.